Hello, I'm Amy Stevenson, and this is The Human CEO. In each episode, we'll be meeting with CEOs and senior leaders to understand their approach to leadership, the challenges they faced, and how they overcame them. We'll also be asking what they feel it takes to be a great leader.
The secret is to recruit people that are better than you in their own specific areas, and they will be, for that reason, better than you. It's easy to say, but it is perhaps hard to do in practice, but I think that's one of the secrets to being a great leader.
Welcome to The Human CEO. I'm your host, Amy Stevenson, and today I'm joined by Andrew Busby. Andrew's the co-founder of SafePrem Solutions, the world's first platform that enables businesses to access solutions to ensure that their premises are kept safe and secure from all viruses and bacteria. Andrew's a retail writer, former Forbes contributor, IBM futurist, and author of the book Harry Was Right All Along. Andrew's one of the most high-profile in-demand figures in retail and regularly features in the top 10 lists of global retail influencers. Andrew joins us today to share his insight as a leader and a human CEO. Thank you for joining us today, Andrew. It's great to have you with us.
Good afternoon, and thanks very much. It's great to be here, Amy.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for your time. So can you tell us a little bit about SafePrem, your organisation, what it stands for and what you're working towards, please?
SafePrem is a company that I founded with my business partner, two of us last year. It's born out of the pandemic, really. And the seed of it was sown probably around about March, April time last year. If we can cast our minds back to those dark days of the first of many lockdowns. And I was introduced to a company they had pivoted towards producing traffic light systems for store occupancy, which probably most of us now have become familiar with. Not all retailers by a long way use them, but quite a few do. Then was introduced to one or two other companies that were also manufacturing and producing solutions which helped to make particularly retail premises safer from the virus. Now, I'm not referring here to PPE or perspex screens or that sort of thing. We've kind of left those alone. But anyway, the companies I was introduced to, it then kind of dawned on me that, well, why don't we curate these? In other words, bring them all together, because some of the feedback that I had at that time was that businesses who wanted to make their premises safer for people weren't sure where to go. So it was kind of like, yes, they knew where to go to get hand sanitizer and so on and so forth and those sorts of things. But for some of these other measures, they didn't know. So that was when the idea for a directory was born. And that directory now has nearly 150 different solutions providers on it. We have been building the proposition since then. A lot of work has gone into the proposition, signing up partners, and what we've done is we've trademarked the name, and we have invited other organisations to, and are constantly inviting other organisations to join. So what we realised was that whilst people's attitudes have probably irreversibly changed towards cleanliness and hygiene and the virus, what actually is happening for retailers is that their physical premises, to get us back there, because an awful lot of us are still quite anxious and about going back into shops and enclosed spaces. So to get us back there, they need to digitally level up with their online counterparts. So what we're seeing, and we took another look at our SafePrem directory and realized that an awful lot of the solutions providers and partners that are on the directory actually are providing what we now call smart solutions for retail. So I'm thinking of things like online booking and appointments apps. I'm thinking of things like live stream commerce, live streaming from the store to either one-to-one or one-to-many, usually one-to-many, which has really taken off, funnily enough, in China, with people like Alibaba who are using that. And there's countless others, and we could look at smart mirrors, smart fitting rooms. So in other words, we don't want to necessarily have that same touch and feel that we used to. So there'll be different payments apps. I saw the other day a Tesco store. I think it was North London. And they were saying that they were trying to keep themselves safer by not accepting cash. Now, there's a debate there to be had about that, obviously, but it's just that shows the direction of travel of where they're going. So as far as SafePrem, what we stand for, yes, it's a commercial organisation. However, we give back 50% of all our revenue in retail and hospitality to in retail, the Retail Trust, and in hospitality action charities. So, yes, we're a commercial organisation, but we're also, we like to think of ourselves as a little bit of a movement, because ultimately what we're trying to do, and this is where it doesn't apply just to retail and hospitality, what we're trying to do is to help to enable businesses of all types to get back. We hear so many, particularly from hospitality, that it's very, very tough, and they need the social distancing restrictions to be lifted to allow them to get back the sort of customer numbers that they need to make any sort of profit. And so we're really trying to support those businesses, but businesses of all types, so they can get back safely not necessarily get back to where we used to be either, because we think that it's going to be a new place that people are going to be, and we think that that there are going to be new solutions, which certainly within retail have been talked about for a good number of years. So most of the trends that we're now seeing had all been discussed for years, but they've just been massively, massively accelerated by the pandemic. I think the only new trend, which I don't think anybody really predicted, was working from home. And the implications of that. And of course, that's a topic I think it probably is in its own right, because there are massive implications for, again, particularly retail and hospitality, but all sorts of other areas, travel and offices and so on and so forth. So as I say, probably a subject in its own right, but something that affects not all of us, but a percentage of us who are fortunate that we can work from home. And it will change the working environment. Long answer to your question about but that's kind of that SafePrem, and where we are at the moment. We're just entering our first funding round. So we're looking to raise funds which we need for recruitment and marketing and some tech, but mostly the former. So it's exciting times.
Fantastic. And so as a leader of that type of organisation at that stage in its life cycle, what kind of challenges are you up against, or what are the key challenges that you're up against at the moment as a leader?
I think looking at external factors, so given what I've just described in terms of the business, and we'll keep it at the moment to the safer, if you like, part of the business, there is a lot of education which is still needed. There's a lot of, particularly on social media, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about COVID. I'm one of those people who has felt it my obligation to spend hours and hours researching the topic. It is quite interesting, because if you look back over time, there's been, scientists don't necessarily agree at any particular point in time. There's been a lot of learning about COVID, a lot of learning about how it is transmitted. which directly affects what we are seeing today in terms of social distancing and wearing face covering and so on and so forth. But now it's generally accepted that it is primarily transmitted airborne through tiny particles, which we all emit whilst we're breathing, let alone speaking. And they can hang, depending on the circumstances and the situation, they can hang in the air for up to 3 hours after a potentially infected person has left the room. So we're learning all the time about it. And one of the frustration probably wouldn't be quite right, but certainly one of the challenges that we've got is that people still feel that having, whether it be in their pub or restaurant or shop or whatever, having a one-way system and some hand sanitizer at the door somehow makes the premises safe, which simply isn't true. Yet they don't do any harm, and yes, they do some good, but and I'm saying all this not as an epidemiologist, but as somebody who's taken quite an interest in the topic because it relates to the business. So that I would say as an external factor, is one of the biggest challenges. I think in terms of being a co-founder of the business, it's quite interesting seeing how myself and my co-founder, who also has a very strong retail background, Pat was senior director at places like Debenhams and Arcadia and so forth, which I always make sure I pull his leg about in terms of, okay, so there's a trend appearing here, isn't there? And I think Claire's Accessories might have been another one. And any other failed retailer you care to mention. But I think, yes, he did spend time at Woolworths as well. So, Pat Kelly, if you're listening to this, I've given you the name check that you wanted. But no, going back to the challenges, it's fascinating how our relationship, because we've been connected on LinkedIn before all this, realised that a lot of our thinking was aligned. But obviously, when you're starting a business, there is going to be a certain element of friction. And both of us are, I think, of a particular sort, that we're quite strong-willed. And you like to get your own way, and inevitably that will from time to time. But I think the strength of it in this particular situation I found is that whether we agree or not on certain things, we both respect each other's opinion and point of view. And I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a quality which I know we'll come on to a bit later about what makes a good leader. And empathy. And as I say, I know we'll come on to that a little bit later. But that, from time to time, that's been a challenge. But each time we've talked it through, almost, exclusively, on a video call like you and I are doing now. And I guess we've all got used to that. But that in itself, again, has probably been within the lifespan of SafePrem, which was born in a COVID era, if you like. There are certain conversations which you do need to have face-to-face to pick up on all the body language. And so that's been a bit of a challenge. And I'm not saying it has, but I know that it can sometimes lead to a little bit of miscommunication. But as I say, I think we're all, as a nation, we've almost overnight been digitally educated to, the same minimum level. And that means that whether it's Zoom or Teams or Google Meets or whatever other flavor, then we've all got used to that, and we collaborate in slightly different ways. So I think, that is a challenge which we wouldn't have foreseen, if you like, and wouldn't have been one pre-pandemic. But it's great for the time management because, there's, I don't know about you, but when I think of the amount of time that I used to spend commuting
Yes.
And I'm sure every one of us has thought about that. I don't think we'll go back to that.
I don't think so.
That I think will be seen as, what on earth were we thinking? To spend hours on a crowded train, only then to get on, if it's London, to an even more crowded underground train.
Yeah.
It's and that's a societal thing. It's changing society. It's not just work. It's changing society. Absolutely. But those are certainly some of the challenges that spring to mind.
Brilliant, thank you. And in terms of your leadership career, then, how did that come about? Was that something? Did you always set your sights on sort of the CEO role, or did that happen quite organically because you were passionate about the organisations you worked in or founded?
I think I fell into it, probably like a lot of people, that, I didn't wake up one morning and think, right, I want to be a CEO at all. I mean, the leadership is quite interesting. I guess my leadership journey started many years ago, actually pre-retail days. So I spent a good number of years with Barclays, and I was within their IT operations and services in the UK. And then the last few years was when I was with them, I was fortunate enough to be posted to the Bahamas. And I ran the IT operations for a data center there. And it was a centralized operation for the whole of the Caribbean. And at that time, Barclays was running primarily offshore banking services across the Caribbean. And I mentioned that not just because it was the Bahamas and it was a great life, but it was very hard work. But I was kind of parachuted in to a situation where there were not just local Bahamians who felt that one of them should have got the job. There were others recruited from across the Caribbean islands because we wanted it to be very inclusive. And so that was probably really my first proper leadership role, where I needed to bring a new team together from different nations across the Caribbean, people who probably resented the fact that I was there in the first place, a lot of different cultural experiences and so on and so forth. But that was great, and I learned an awful lot from that. And the next role, which has actually started me, and I'm going back now to 1999, so over 20 years ago, I moved back from there and joined Kingfisher and ran IT operations for Superdrug, which in those days was part of the Kingfisher Group, along with people like Comet and Woolworths and so forth. And again, that was another step in the learning, bringing a team together and having to build a common goal, which was providing the right levels of service to the business from a lot of different IT operations, and in some cases quite difficult to do that. So that was and then kind of took the next 12 years out because it was a business development career, and then before SafePrem, I founded Retail Reflections, which is a retail analyst, and we comment and write and speak about retail, just myself and my partner in that. But even with a small boutique company like that, you still need to set the goals and the direction and the objectives and so on and so forth. And all the things that any business of any size would need to do. And then of course, just over a year ago now, probably about 16, 17 months, SafePrem was the idea came about, and we became a limited company in August last year. At the moment, myself and my business partner, but things will change rapidly once we start recruiting. And I'm expecting that those things that I learnt all those years ago, some of those I'm going to need to call on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about empathy earlier on in the call as a characteristic that was key to be a good leader. Is there anything else that you think is a common denominator across great leaders, or other characteristics that you think a good leader needs? Yeah,
and leading on from empathy, one thing that is going to be, for me personally, impossible to do, and that's to be female. So what I mean by that is, and again, I'll link it to the retail sector, because sadly, there are very, very few female leaders within retail.
Okay.
And why I pick that out is that generally, I think men, and this isn't obviously a gender debate or anything like that, but generally men are quite competitive and egotistic. Women are empathetic, and they have a far better instinct.
Okay.
And I think from that point of view, that's some of the leaders that I've admired have been women, and I think it's for that reason. When I kind of sit down and think about that and reflect on that, it's because they have those qualities. And I think too many times these days, people associate things like being empathetic and calm and a more gentle outlook as somehow being weak, which of course they're not. That's a strength. And I admire that, and I look up to that. I think generally, men in leadership, not all, obviously, this is, but in an awful lot of cases that I've personally witnessed, men will be far more combative. Men will take a slightly different route. I think because of the innate competitive instincts that men have. Now, one good example, I think, of that very recently appeared was with Brewdog.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw, but Brewdog had a fantastic reputation. Their leadership team, they seemed inspirational and so on and so forth. Well, as we've now learned from quite a number of ex-employees, it wasn't quite like that internally. And actually what they were saying was that there was a culture of, not fear, I think that's too wrong a word, but it certainly is incredibly competitive, all based on the bottom line and growth. Okay. And a lot of that for me seems to come down to the business of being in business. And I think that's changing. So, but to go back to, your question, I think that, we talk about empathy, being inspiring. A leader needs to motivate their team. They need to bring their team together. They need to lead. I'm sure you've seen there are a lot of examples of the differences between a leader and a boss.
Yes.
A leader very much leads by example. And I think that's very important. I think the other one that I would add to that, because there are so many qualities that I think a great leader needs to have, but to be a very effective communicator. And to do it in the right way. So communication isn't issuing directives. And I think this is where an awful lot of leaders they get to that position of being a leader, and they've been used to controlling things and making decisions on their own and doing things on their own and saying, right, this is the road that we're going to go down because I say so. And then when the business gets bigger and bigger and they get more people around them, they begin to wonder, well, if I'm not clear and don't set out the agenda, perhaps I'll be perceived as being indecisive. Whereas the strength is to take all the opinions and views and so forth of the team on board and then make the decision based on that. One of the things that one of my passions is motor racing.
Okay.
And years ago, in the late 60s and 70s, there was a Scottish racing driver called Jackie Stewart, Sir Jackie Stewart, and he won the World Championship 3 times. And the thing that he used to say about being a leader, leading a team, was the secret is to recruit people that are better than you in their own specific areas. You need to recruit people who are the best that you can get in their own particular areas, and they will be, for that reason, better than you. And that's the whole. And I think that's I've taken that with me, certainly. And I think it's easy to say, but it is perhaps hard to do in practice. But I think that's one of the secrets to being a great leader.
Absolutely. And in part, I guess you've answered my next question, because I was going to ask if there was a piece of advice or an experience that you've had that shaped your leadership style.
I think, I think it's trusting your instinct.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether that's age with me and whether that applies when you're younger. Perhaps it does. And, I'll be perfectly, if I had somebody in the team who was 21, 22, and their instinct was whatever it happened to be, then would certainly listen to that. But I think there are so many times, both in professional and personal life, where after the event, after the decision has been taken, mm-hmm. whether it proves ultimately to be the right one or the wrong one, I go back and reflect on that and then realise, my gut instinct, my gut feel was actually pretty close to the mark.
Yeah.
And that, again, because we're all different, we're different colours, aren't we? The personality traits, we're red or green or blue or whatever. And for people who, I think it's red, but I could be wrong, but there are, people who live by data and numbers and spreadsheets mm-hmm. would probably find that difficult because they need the empirical evidence to be able to do that. And I know that I'm not that. If you want to get an idea or a concept over to me, give me a PowerPoint, but please don't make it too long. Don't show me a spreadsheet. But for other people, it's the reverse. And again, that's it's great that we're all different. And wouldn't the world be boring if we were all exactly the same?
Absolutely.
So I would say that would be it. Trust your instinct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that going back to your point, recognizing those differences in the people in the team as well is absolutely paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick comment on that, which is one thing that I'll be facing very soon with SafePrem, and I mentioned recruitment. Mm-hmm. I know that one of the types of people that we need is somebody who's incredibly good digitally. So that could be web development, or it could be search engine optimization and a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. Now, that person is probably going to be in their early to mid-20s, and they will be able to run rings around me, when it comes to their specific field, and that's great. And I want them to, if you like. Mm-hmm. And then again, my role is going to change, because it's going to be one of giving not the doing of it, but the direction of it, and so on and so forth, and giving the means for them to be able to. But it's a bit like within, again, a retail context, and we know how fast retail is developing. Mobile commerce, doing your shopping or your whatever using apps from your mobile phone. And we look at some of the, those, all joking aside, but sadly, some of those retailers that have failed, and it's sad because people lose their jobs. Mm-hmm. But, you look at some of the leaders today, and they are probably going to be people like me. In other words, middle-aged, white, Caucasian males. And there's one thing that people like me can understand intellectually, and that's how a 21-year-old goes about shopping my brand. Mm-hmm. But emotionally, never in a million Sundays is it going to. In other words, it for me, the qualities within the team and the quality that a leader needs to understand, particularly now when the world is moving so rapidly and change is happening so quickly, is to realise that they don't know everything. And that there are other people out there who do know far more within their particular field, and that probably more so than ever before, those ideas have got to be, given given airtime, if you like, to be heard and listened to. So, and again, that probably comes down to trusting your instinct with that particular person that you've recruited actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's real power in diversity as well, isn't there? In terms of when you're recruiting, you're bringing those people into the team, like you say, people with different perspectives from different backgrounds, even neurodivergent as well as the traditional.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I think that's probably something that a lot of organisations are still working through. We talk, I know, an awful lot about diversity, quite rightly so. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think there's still quite a way to go on that. And yeah, it's just realizing that as a leader, there are other people out there with completely different perspectives that actually are probably, in many cases, perhaps a better perspective than your own.
Okay. And so in terms of advice that you would offer to someone that was looking to follow in your footsteps, so either they were just at the point where they were going to step up into a leadership role, or maybe they were starting their own enterprise and would therefore become the leader of that organization, what advice might you offer them?
Do it. Again, follow your instinct.
Yep.
Don't be afraid. But as a lot of people in running much larger organisations than I would, when I've spoken to quite a few of them, mm-hmm. They'll tell you that it's quite a lonely place, mm-hmm. Which is something that others outside of that probably wouldn't at first realise. When you are in that position. But I would say that follow what you it's kind of the mind and the heart and so forth. But I think that if it's a passion, mm-hmm. then absolutely. And I think that's probably a lot of it. I mean, for me, retail is a passion. Yeah. What I'm doing at SafePrem is a passion. And if it is that, then it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you've got a great idea, then but equally go into it with your eyes open. I mean, I'm learning all the time, mm-hmm. And we're all learning all the time. Yeah. New things that I, for example, haven't been through a seed funding round. Simply in my background, that hasn't happened. So I'm learning what it means to do that. Uh-huh. I would say, follow what your instinct tells you. And if it's a real passion for something, then absolutely. And I think, to be fair, there's, if we look at the current, I'll refer to them as millennial and Gen Z. But if we look at, 20 to 30-year-olds, I think they do have a different attitude to this sort of thing than people of my age did 30 years ago. I think they are far more entrepreneurial, and I think they have, far more great ideas, and they're not necessarily afraid to take a bit of a risk. In my era, the baby boomer era, it was kind of, you get a job and that could be in the bank or whatever. Still remember those careers evenings and what have you. And you get a job, and it might even be for life. And you buy a house, and you have your wife, your husband, your two children, your dog, and it was kind of laid out in front of you like that. None of that necessarily today, which I think is a great, it's an exciting thing, and I think that is probably healthier.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. And thinking about the leaders that you admire, then, is there one in particular that stands out that you particularly admire, and if so, why?
Well, I've probably, like all the questions so far, I'm not going to answer it exactly how it's been asked. So, okay. I picked out two, and I'll explain why for different reasons. One who's no longer with us. So again, within a retail context, we're all familiar with Selfridges in London. They have stores elsewhere, but main one's London. And the founder, which is Harry Selfridge, and the book that I wrote a couple of years ago, I call it Harry was right all along. Harry was right all along, because his view of what Selfridges should be and what it meant for his audience, for his customers, was, if you go back and read some of the things that he was saying over 100 years ago, is absolutely inspirational. And, we need people like him around today. And so he created something there for his customers. And he said things like, well, if they come and they don't buy, and he referred to them as guests in that same building on Oxford Street, near Marble Arch. And he said, if they don't buy on that occasion, that doesn't matter. But we are going to give them such a great experience that perhaps they'll come back, and the next time they will buy something. Yeah. And things like that. And I think from that point of view, I still find him inspirational. The other leader, somebody who I have had the pleasure to work for, and she's now chair and has been for a few years of Tech UK, somebody called Jacqueline DeRocas.
Okay.
And Jacqueline, I was working in a business development role at a company, an American software company called Computer Associates. Mm-hmm. And she came in as the country head for the UK. And in a predominantly male-dominated environment, and we've heard my views on that earlier, she injected all those qualities that I was discussing earlier about female leaders, okay. and still does to this day, and has a portfolio of roles and so forth. Incredibly calm, incredibly inspiring, clear communicator, no ego involved, but that didn't detract from a laser-like focus on okay. where the business needed to go and revenue growth and so on and so forth. But a real object lesson in bringing a team with you. And we'll hear about great leaders, how, people would, they would go over the trenches, they would die for them. And whether that literally is true, I'm not sure, but I know that sentiment. I felt that where, it inspired you to want to go into work, to want to be in meetings with her or whatever, to feel that, at first hand, and that calm energy, if you like, which wasn't ranting and raving and shouting and gesticulating and any of these sorts of things. And it really proved that that for me is the far more effective way of leading.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And in terms of leadership, is there anything else that you would share with the people that are listening to this podcast with regards to SafePrem and what's next? Obviously, you said you were going through your first round of funding. What's next for SafePrem? What's on the cards over the next 6 to 12 months?
Thank you. Yeah, so the plan is that we raise the first round of funding. We know exactly where that money will be spent and on what and when and how and so forth. And so that would, if we were sat here in 12 months' time, then we would be looking at £1 million turnover company. Mm-hmm. We would have a staff of probably around 6 people. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, most, if not all, of the audience of this would have heard of us, by other means. We'll be contributing healthily to those charities that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And we would be helping an awful lot of retail and hospitality businesses. And also, we see ourselves, I mentioned earlier that we see ourselves as a bit of a movement. We see ourselves as being a bit of a lobby movement. So we would expect that we would be a voice in the industries about getting business back. Because I've talked throughout this podcast primarily about retail and hospitality, because that's where we're focusing initially. But we also have talks about with conference centres, with airports. It could extend to education, to health, to all sorts of areas. And I think that it's difficult, isn't it, to look forward even 3 weeks, let alone 3 months, and let alone 12 months, because we don't really know quite what's going to be happening. But we feel that, as I think I said earlier, attitudes will continue to change, but it'll get to a point where businesses, in order to attract people back, are going to have to do something different. Mm-hmm. And that's when I think there'll be a tipping point. It could be through awareness or legislation or a combination of both. Yeah. Where we're laying the foundations at the moment, and we believe that probably in the next 3 to 6 months there will be that kind of light bulb moment, whereby people realise, we've actually got to do something about this. Otherwise, our business is not going to be sustainable, and so we need to put some of these measures in place. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting time. We're looking at fairly healthy growth. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I wish you the best of luck with it, and I'll watch this space, as they say.
Thank you.